This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Kari Sulenes of Project Atlas. Kari, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into Project Atlas? And then what exactly is Project Atlas?
Great, yeah. So I have a degree in clinical psychology, and I did my doctoral work on self-care and authentic leadership. So how is it that we show up at work as our most authentic, full selves? And sort of researching this interplay between who we are in our personal lives and how we show up at work. So that's kind of my background. And I met Howie and Jake, who are the general partners of Alpha Bridge Ventures, which is a venture fund based out of San Francisco that invests in bridge round companies. And they were interested in building an in-house platform to help founders develop from effective founders into leaders, essentially. And so we met up, and my background fits perfectly with what it is that they're trying to do. And that is essentially how Project Atlas was born. So maybe I'll say something now about what Project Atlas is. That'd be helpful?
Yeah, tell us more about Project Atlas and what it does.
Yeah, so Project Atlas started out as the in-house platform for Howie and Jake's fund, Alpha Bridge Ventures. And really the focus of that came out of their experience that founders struggle to transition themselves into effective leaders. And they also struggle sometimes to find support around basic things like, I'm really stressed out, or I don't eat regular meals throughout the day, or now that I've started this company, I don't have time to exercise, or I don't see my family anymore. And sometimes we use the analogy that founders are really like the Olympians of the entrepreneurial world, and yet Olympic athletes have whole teams built around them to help support them physically and emotionally and mentally, and to help them get from place A to place B. And founders really have none of that. So Project Atlas sort of stepped in to bridge that gap, to connect founders with a team of professionals who can help them build their company in such a way that it becomes wildly successful, and also in a way where it's sustainable for them personally.
It seemed like one of the key elements is emotional intelligence, and you always hear about the technical skills and the managerial skills, but you don't often hear about the emotional intelligence skills. Can you talk more about that aspect of it?
The foundation of Project Atlas is actually holistic development. So we're not a leadership development program the way that you might see that typically expressed, like with leadership coaches or executive leadership or even leadership workshops, where they're really talking about developing some sense of personal leadership, but mostly around business skills. Project Atlas is grounded in the idea that we show up as our whole person at work. And if our nutrition is failing, or if we haven't slept a full night, or if we're not exercising effectively, or if we don't have this sort of emotional wellness behind us, that we don't show up as emotionally intelligent and effective leaders. And so we see all of these systems as connected. And emotional intelligence for us really is one of the key players, because leadership in business really is all about people. And when we manage our relationships well, outside of work and in work, then we're far more successful. So what we're looking at in terms of developing founders' emotional intelligence is starting with self-awareness so that they know what it is that they need, and they can show up for themselves in a way where they're getting what they need, so then they can pass that benefit on to the people they work with.
Do you have any examples of groups you've worked with, without getting into the details, but at a high level, how does the program work for them? What do they engage with, and how do you deliver this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we started out doing when I was building Project Atlas was interview a bunch of founders about their experience and how they've reached out for help. And what we discovered was that especially people in this sort of bridge round stage of company, they've been building their company now for a few years. And so they've been in sprint mode maybe for, say, 3 years, and they're starting to hit the edge of burnout. And so people we work with are maybe experiencing adrenal fatigue. They have kind of isolated themselves. They're starting to experience the disconnection that also comes from living a very public life. And yet they're right on the precipice of building a company that's about to explode in a good way. Like they're about to be the CEO of a big company and they don't have the leadership skills. They're emotionally burnt out and they're also physically depleted. What we do in Project Atlas is that we bring founders into the program and they go through a comprehensive 360 evaluation that looks at their mental health, their cognitive abilities, also their emotional intelligence, their physical health, including nutrition, sleep, and exercise, and then also their leadership strengths and the places that they need extra help kind of on the business side. And after we do that, we build a team around them called their Life Board of Directors. And the Life Board of Directors is like that Olympic support team I was talking about earlier. It's experts in the fields that the founders need in order to move them forward in a really meaningful way.
And how many people are surrounding them, and are each one as specific to one skill, or is everyone cross-trained?
So every partner that we have as a part of Project Atlas either was a founder themselves or has extensive experience working with founders, and they also have deep knowledge in one area. For example, maybe they are a nutritionist and have deep knowledge in nutrition, but they also have a great understanding of what it means to be an effective leader and what it means to develop as an emotionally intelligent person. So every person in our network not only has incredible understanding of what it means to be a founder, but they also have kind of a dual competency in working holistically as well as some deep knowledge in one area.
And so how long does the program last? Is this a 2-month, 3-month program, or is this a year-round type program?
Yeah, so the full expression of Project Atlas, we like to engage people for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. But one of our main principles is that the program is absolutely personalized and customizable to each person. So during that 360 evaluation, we're getting an understanding of what kinds of goals the founder might have. And then our Life Board of Directors we build around them helps them understand what the optimum engagement period for them will be. So every step of the way, we're thinking about what the founder needs and how we can best get them there based on what we know from the research and what we know about how our program effectively works, and also keeping in mind the complicated and busy schedules that founders have and how we can effectively meet their needs without impeding their ability to run their companies.
And so how do you deal with the clients that come in crisis mode? They're about to run out of cash, the company is facing lawsuits, and things are about to burn down. Are you able to work with them at that stage, or is that just too late?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are set up in Project Atlas to meet founders wherever they are. So that means we have people on our leadership network who are used to cleaning up messes and helping people dig themselves out of holes. We also have people who are perfectly poised to speed people forward. So someone who's already thriving, we help them to leverage their strengths to move them to the next level. So yeah, exactly. Any founder who comes to us, we're prepared to meet them in whatever state we find them.
And so in advance of the program, is there reading material, is there research material, is there other training materials that come in advance of it, and what does that cover?
Yeah, so because our program is absolutely customized for each founder, we don't have any standardized reading material or pre-engagement materials. What we do have are monthly dinners that right now we're calling Founder Masterclass. And so founders can come and get a sense of who our coaches are and learn sort of discrete skills. So for example, maybe how do you deal with change? We'll have a dinner topic on that. Or how do you see yourself as an emotionally fit founder and develop your emotional intelligence? We have a dinner on that. And so we do offer some other ways for founders to engage with our material before they fully commit to the program. The real sort of learning happens after we build the Life Board of Directors, and then that package is built specifically for the founder who comes into the program.
Can you talk about any specific cases or case studies or examples of people that have come through the program and what they've gotten out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually have not completed or graduated anyone out of our program. We have just started our first expression. So I can give you sort of a high-level case example of what it is that we expect people will find and sort of the feedback that we've been getting in the initial expression of our program. In the first interviews and conversations I've been having with people who are engaging with Project Atlas, the first thing that they say to me is, "Where have you been all my life?" Like, how have we not had this sort of support before now? And I think one of the biggest values that we bring to the table is that we're a VC-supported founder development program, and we're approaching this holistically. And so what we expect people will get out of this, and our initial feedback sort of confirms this, is that first of all, they are given the chance to care for themselves. They're given permission, they're given the financial support that they need, and we sort of remove all of the barriers for founders to focus on themselves.
When you say it's VC supported, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our relationship with Alpha Bridge Ventures, so Project Atlas's relationship with Alpha Bridge Ventures, is one where we act as their in-house platform. And what that means is that Alpha Bridge Ventures is paying for their founders to come through Project Atlas. So Howie and Jake kind of are stepping out, I think, as leaders in this field and saying that not only do we think it's important that you take care of yourself, but we're going to make sure that that happens. And we're going to remove all of the barriers because we fundamentally believe that healthy founders equals healthy returns, which means that founders really can't take their companies any further than they've taken themselves. And so this also becomes a way for VCs to protect their investments.
Well, one of the biggest reasons startups fail is not because of the product or the market or the technology, but because the founders can't get along. How can this program help in that case?
Yeah, so co-founder conflict is one of the areas that we specifically program around. So for those people who are experiencing difficulties in their co-founding relationships or even just difficulties in the team, we have coaches on our team who specialize in that and can intervene and also help the team learn skills to move forward in a more effective way. So that's, I mean, as you said, that's one of the major reasons that startups fail. And we hope also if people are coming in with healthy co-founder relationships, that we can get out in front of problems and help them learn to communicate effectively before it becomes an issue.
What portion of the program is built around interpersonal communication with other people? I know some founders that could use more help in that direction. They just don't have a lot of experience with it, and being more effective it would be a key element to their success. So how much of it is just basic communication work that has to go on?
Yeah, again, it's hard to kind of answer that question because everything in the program is so specialized for the founder. However, as you mentioned, communication is key. You know, like I said before, that most of business is really about people, and the way that we interact with people is through our communication. So if we are not impeccable with our words and if we're not clear in our communication, then we're not going to be very successful in business. So our leadership coaches, our emotional intelligence coaches, our mental health coaches, and also our fitness providers are all really well versed in clear and direct communication and can help founders activate that as not only a skill for self-care, like setting boundaries and delegating and being clear about what the expectations are, but also in how to run an effective team and an effective company.
Right. And just to go back to emotional intelligence, how do you teach emotional intelligence? It seems like that's something that is innate, or can it be taught? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's probably a question, Hall, for the research experts in that space. However, we fundamentally believe, and the partners in Project Atlas also believe, that emotional intelligence can be taught and developed, and that most of us actually have a pretty good basic understanding or ability for emotional intelligence, but it's been underdeveloped. And so we have all sorts of strategies, and our coaches are experts in this, and I am not, in developing emotional intelligence in the founders. And one of the core components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And every aspect of our program is built around increasing self-awareness so that founders know what's going on with them personally so they can use that information to interact more effectively with the people around them.
So when do you expect to finish this first cohort so we have the final results for the first round? How long will that take?
Yeah, we will wrap up our first cohort of members of Project Atlas in August, and we're really excited to share our benchmarks with you and listeners if that's interesting. We expect to learn a lot about how we run the program, and we also expect that this first iteration of Project Atlas will sort of make our first dent in startup culture and promoting our idea that self-care and the health of founders is fundamentally important.
Well, that's great. In the last couple of minutes we have here, what should we cover that we haven't so far?
Yeah, I think another thing that might be really important and it is sort of interesting about Project Atlas is this relationship that we have with VCs. And I mentioned briefly earlier that founders are often stepping into a place in their company life cycles where they're living really public lives. And I've heard from founders in my research phase that most people are actually relying on their venture capitalists for advice and support. However, you can imagine that this actually puts them in a really tough position, right? That the people they're getting funding from and they want to impress and act strong for are also the people they're going to for support. So Project Atlas actually creates sort of a separate, private, and highly confidential space for founders to just be in the struggle wherever they are. And we think that creating a space like this is not only going to shift the experience of individual founders, but we believe that it's starting a larger conversation, especially in San Francisco and sort of startup culture, around what it's okay to talk about, and that founders being in struggle is actually an expected part of the journey. And that's our message, and we hope that this becomes public and actually kind of moves the needle for everybody, not just the people we work with directly.
Well, that's great. So what's the best way for the audience to get back in touch with you?
Yeah, I think the best way is actually to go visit our website. So Project Atlas has its own page, alphabridge.vc. You can learn a little bit more about the program there and understand a little bit more about our philosophy. And we have a contact us button, and that comes directly to me. So if people are interested in learning more about Project Atlas or Alpha Bridge Ventures and the fund, you could get in touch through the website, and I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll have to have you back at the completion of the cohort to see what the results are, and looking forward to seeing you back then.
Yeah, thank you, Hal.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.